Okay. Well, hello again. My name is Elias Cattan. I work from and have worked in Mexico City. Was born here my entire life. And this is sometimes the view that we get from the volcanoes within the city. We are situated in a very special part of the planet, I believe, and I'm going to go through maybe some of the subjects that you've already gone through. I'm going to go mainly through the ecological and living systems, which I've seen that a lot of people touch on. But I want to share it from a little bit from my perspective. This is a little bit, I'm a big fan of sci-fi, and this moment in this film where everything is lost and the droid says, "Is it possible?" Right? And Cooper says, "It's necessary." Right? I'm a big fan. So I believe this is not, is it possible, but the it's necessary moment. And this is a lot of what I say when people approach me to say if the projects we are saying are possible or not. This is obviously a personal journey. As you all may well know, it revolves around participating in your own development, in your own health. And in my experience has been in swimming in rivers and camping and doing some type of shamanic work even. I play a lot with memes, and this is something that came up in a conveners meeting in the regenerative networks community. Hunter S. Lovin said, it's rated R for regenerative. And this is a little bit of maybe what needs to happen, right? It's what makes all our movies appealing or attractive. How can we move on to making a better message, I believe, or that can transcend more than the people that are already convinced of what we're trying to do. In essence, a lot of what we have been trying to do is put water at the center of things, right? And regeneration implies communities, implies economic development, implies a broad range of activities. But water is, in one way, how we can center a very complex narrative. We are part of the same island, right? And a lot of what I try to do with this presentation is present different images that have spoken to me and helped me understand where we are. And the best way to unravel a sphere, as Buckminster puts it, helps us understand that we are part of one island that moves around the sphere and that it creates a system, right? This system intimately tied obviously with the moon and the rest of the solar system, and how Lovelock frames it as the Gaia hypothesis then turns into this theory. And ultimately, again, going back to these images that helped me understand as one of these answers, right, of the web of life. And yeah, here it is, right? All different organisms on the planet, and there we are. So we are part of this intricate web of life, and we could ultimately understand more of our purpose within this web of life, understanding the science behind of it. And obviously through ritual and meditation, as Stephen Harding sometimes does, understanding a broader, more whole aspect of how life has evolved. And maybe starting a little bit at the beginning, right? 4.6 billion years ago, and the solar system and explosions, supernovas, or rocks orbiting around rocks and then coalescing into planets. A small planetoid crashed with our planet, and that's what created the moon, because it's not the Earth, right? It's the Earth-Moon system, according to astrologists, I believe. Astronomers, sorry. And out of this chaos, Gaia is born. And this impact and the moon not only dictates when you can harvest structural bamboo, but our own biochemical, our own bodies, right? The oceans, the seasons would not be without this system or this process of events. And just understanding the deep complexity and deep time, as Stephen Harding frames it, is part of what has made me fall in love with life. And it starts, and again, the graphic of saying, how can we understand what 4.6 billion years entails? What happened a month ago, right? What happened yesterday? What happened a million years ago? So framing life as this deep time, this deep process of evolution is also what this deep understanding of our recent emergence into this evolutionary process, right? We have been here a couple of minutes. The dinosaurs were wiped out, what, like a week ago, right? And this is 365 days scaled to that 4.6 billion years. And again, life has been here since March, but life took the whole year to evolve into terrestrial plants. So what kind of reverence should we pay to bacteria and all these microorganisms that the world is learning more and more? And a more experiential way, because we always say embodying it, the knowledge is a big part of it. And this app is something developed out of Stephen Harding's work on the deep time walk. You go through 4.6 kilometers. Every meter is 1 million years. So dinosaurs went extinct 65 meters to the end. Life has evolved through 3.8 kilometers. And history, Mesopotamia, is just half a centimeter ago. So if you do this walk, again, it helps you have this experience and this feeling of how we can help, and what has helped me really in my unraveling and understanding a little bit more and more each time about the science of this evolution, right? The earth is alive. It just moves at a different pace. And there are these microorganisms that we always have to take into account, right? Like these stromatolites that are part of this oxygen-producing system, or these coccolithophorids that are microscopic but are part of how we are participating in how the earth cools. As in the documentary, in other words, this is the air conditioning of the earth. And maybe, and I agree, we should stop making more mechanical analogies, but we also, how can we help people through that beautiful complexity, right, that life entails? And again, you go to the micro little organism that knows how to ventilate or how to not erode the soil because of how the leaves are placed, and how this beautiful complexity ultimately expresses through one of the most biodiverse places on earth, which is the Manu, where the Amazon breaks into the Andes. So we also, I believe, need to move into, Schumacher, they say this a lot, on the science of qualities. And I try to emphasize this. We don't need to be scientists, limnologists, hydrologists, geopluvial morphologists to appreciate the beauty and what we can perceive as a healthy system. And again, another way to frame our intricate little minimal part of it, and how we can, through realizing this, also realize our impact, right? Because it is a planet. And for us to be a better part of these cycles will help us evolve with the planet. If we are not, maybe not, right? And this is also another little graphic that helps us understand the deep time and how the earth has maintained a little balance of cold and warm and dry and wet. And the purpose of this, again, we could argue, is life itself. And I love how ultimately this expresses through geometry and through proportional growth, and the golden section of how you see it expressed in the Nautilus, or you can measure your entire body with a golden ruler, right? These that break in the golden point. And we couldn't hear without a golden section, a proportionate cochlea within our heads, and how we have expressed these beauties through broccoli or through mezcal and tequila, which is also a little organism that grows through this proportional growth. So paying attention to nature and how other organisms like termites are much better architects than us. They build out of their own soil. Part of their compartments are specially tuned so that the mushroom can grow, and they're exactly placed so that sun hits them when they want to and doesn't when it's in the zenith, and it ventilates where they want it to ventilate and doesn't where it doesn't, and some of them are even like flood proof. So we need to understand and also frame what, through how life also is, right? And these multiple different framings of different words right now is like sustainable, sostenible and sustentable, right? There's this always this dialectic in Spanish of which word is right. Some people at some points even said it's like a strict librarian, people always fighting for the right definition. And I think it's as simple as a lot of what this language has been taught to me through the Regenesis group, so it's linking people to place. And as simple as we can frame it, I think it's how we could maybe communicate it a little bit better. In honor of my dear friend and mentor, Tim, oh, sorry, he's going through COVID right now. It's a question of deepening your understanding and of participating in the mystery of what that is. Because nobody in history has been part of a big watershed regeneration with a megalopolis in the middle of it, or with even a semi-small urban development, like maybe Portland is accomplishing, or Vancouver, or Phoenix, or Seoul in Korea, South Korea. So it's a question of also entering into the mystery of things and letting that express. And how do you show up with that? A big part of that development is as easy as going to nature, right? And participating in these walks that take you through deep territories, and you walk from one watershed to another watershed, guided by the community. And this is where it's like really funny and beautiful, because this happens in Oaxaca or in Bali. The community you are engaging in this hike with takes you to the upper part of their little watershed, and there the next community receives you and walks you to their little town. We are defined by our territory, and being intimate in participating within that territory through a walk or a hike or experience, or how they live in these territories, within these territories, is also a part that would help us through this bifurcation point we're going through at this moment in time, and have been going through for a little while. Ilya Prigogine frames it as every complex system, right? He calls it dissipative structures go through this Y, right? Bifurcation point. And in reality also it's like parallel expressions of it, because you see beautiful examples right now emerging all over the world that I like to frame as Hobbiton or Mordor. We are living in a territory where our rivers are toxic, our air is toxic, and governed by orcs. And there are a lot of places that are participating in an emergence of a new culture of growing their own food, making their own beer, and being a peaceful bunch. And sadly, Mexico City is part of the Mordor scenario. These are rivers adjacent to Mexico City in Puebla. They are literal sewers. And again, we don't need to be scientists to know what is clean and what is not. How can we start to change that? And in conversations with Edward, it's speaking to this. It's no bigger a task than how to shift culture, because it's a whole system of culture that produces these dirty rivers. And again, to make reference of how they were just 100 years ago, this is Mexico City 1900 and Mexico City 2000. The same view of the same volcanoes. And I refuse to go into the Thor scenario, or even my dear, I wouldn't do what I do without David Attenborough movies. Our solution is not to wipe out half of the human race, or to see how we can live, right, with 4 million people, as sometimes I believe even Lovelock referred to it. And I again refuse to say we have only the power to record our extinction accordingly. And I'm a big fan again of Paolo Antonelli, but as in recording, we also must realize what we are doing and where we are living in. So a lot of our work has gone into data visualization and trying to unravel these complex mysteries of the air quality we breathe and how many clean air days we have within Mexico as a country. And that air quality not only affects your lungs, but also your cardiovascular and your neurological systems. So maybe in an effort to also help broaden the conversation, like last year we went into mapping glyphosate and this carcinogen present in the herbicide Roundup, and basically labeled as carcinogen. Micro or parts have a big impact in your health, leaky gut syndrome, and a series of other ailments that are part of or related to it. And then studies start to come out on wine, and that all California wines have glyphosate and beers have glyphosate. And it's like, I love beer. What's up with this? Most industrial products have glyphosate. The levels of it are not actually clearly even like studied by labs and required, which is crazy. Corn, Mexican, I'm gonna big like, how do you say? Comillas, corn, because maseca is not actually corn, but has glyphosate. Women products, because of the algodón, the cotton have glyphosate. It's like, and they're finally starting to lose these settlements, right? And a whole series of information is there. I'll send you these slides also. So start to mapping and again, realizing what has, like oatmeal has a lot of glyphosate. And like, this should be like the healthiest thing, right? And compared with some green aspects in the bottom, you see what has much less glyphosate. And again, this is what has gone to the lab. Not entirely enough has been measured, I believe. Yeah, I just sometimes play around with memes of saying what could happen in April 2020. Nobody could have predicted it. But I think we need to make a lot more people accountable. And a lot of what's going on through me participating in the environmental movement for a while is feeling like this. Like the sargassum just sprawling out of the ocean, and we're picking it up, but just more sargassum is coming out. We're really not leveling and addressing things at the systemic level we should. And few things as simple and beautiful as Kate Raworth's work on the donut economics models. And maybe we could start to work on setting a ban on agrochemicals worldwide and realizing how glyphosate and sargassum and our health is all intimately related. And hopefully we do it for the right reasons, but maybe just because we will gather enough pressure of what's gonna eventually, hopefully not, but maybe worsen for the Caribbean and all that glyphosate. Again, coming back to my own little watershed, Mexico City, what it used to be in the 1300s, in the 1850s, these beautiful images done by Mexican artist Tomas, and how the urban sprawl has completely eaten the wetlands. Our sewers here our rivers are sewers. This is part of a little project we did with Greenpeace on getting some samples of the different rivers across our watershed. And really an effort of visiting it and again, experiencing it, and how can we translate those or that experiences to a broader public. And we do a lot of visualization. This was part of a sculpture we mapped and ultimately put in a museum. I'll show you a little later on. And these are all videos also available in our Vimeo thing, if you want to deepen or further research on what happened with that. How we pretend to solve this is through gray infrastructure. This is $5 billion investment that should have been ready in 2010. And it's 10% up to working conditions. And the same happens with the longest, deepest tube they claimed at the moment on the planet. This is one of the two tubes that aims to drain Mexico City of all their waters. You can see, let me see how you see here through, I can't map, I don't know, it doesn't let me do the annotate through if I'm like that, sorry. But you see these two tubes here. This is Túnel Emisor Central and Túnel Emisor Oriente, another of these big infrastructures that aim to drain Mexico City, which coincidentally is named Anahuac region. In Anahuac, in Nahuatl means close or near to the water. We are in a highly abundant water system, have more rain than London, contained in fewer months. And so these monsoons we get through the summers force to make these large tubes that just drain the water. But we also drain the floods, the rain. And we also have tubes that aim to bring water from water that should flow down to the Pacific. So this is two watersheds across, trans-basin movements, and 3 times the energy of Puebla city on just pumping water to Mexico City. And having this dynamic where we're just overexploiting our aquifers generates these little sinkholes, hopefully not bigger, but also part of a system that makes earthquakes much worse in the city because of how buildings settle in the muck. This is Mexico City, again, very few years ago in terms of its development. Magdalena River, our most stubborn river, as a biologist says, because it's the river that crosses the city the longest without being tubed. This is a little project that I can show you a little bit more about at the end. And again, playing with this meme that a dear fellow collaborator of mine did, Ludovic, of trying to explain what is happening, right? Mexico City, you know, has been the scenario, the stage for multiple different apocalyptic movies. And obviously our earthquakes are stuff to be experienced and really at some point celebrated as points where people run to help people. They say that people run towards the falling building, not away from it. And this is the power maybe even of our own little regenerative little salamander, the axolotl, which is one of the most regenerative organisms on the planet, and is one of his endemic sites is Mexico City. So how can we honor these developments and also, again, try to play around and just help to communicate that this is in the benefit of us all? We are in this deep, intricate systemic problems, and relating this to our own health, to our own food, and through our own capacities to regenerate could be part of the solution. And going through Lester Brown's book, that I deeply recommend this Fritjof Capra's mapping, but also to realize his solution. Lester Brown in his book Plan B says it would take squarely around $187 billion to allocate budget to save humanity, as he frames it. Playing around with some friends, just rounded it up through a podcast we do, into saying, why don't we level it up at $300 billion a year? Because we would need maybe more infrastructure in cities, and the world infrastructure goes to rural areas. We want to do arts and culture, and we're definitely going to need something for lawyers. And does $300 billion sound like a lot? In reality, and we compare it to the allocation of companies, or as Lester Brown does, he compares it to the allocation of the military budgets of the world, which we know are ridiculous. So how can we play around with just saying, raising $300 billion, maybe collectively? Maybe we just divide it. And if we divide it, it's $300 a year for the 10% of population, maybe even less. And it's something that the billion people that have a credit card could easily afford. And collectively, we could just allocate money to the people that are doing work on the ground. Because if, again, you compare these budgets with what the UN spends, or what is really allocated to regenerative projects worldwide, you laugh and you cry at the same time. So how can we really just stop framing it as it's in terms of money? Because it's cheaper to invest, as I hope to prove, in gray infrastructure than in cities. And it's always a cultural question. It's always how can we actualize that paradigm or that mindset? And it's a systemic question, it's a complex question, but it's also a personal question of how we can make people open their hearts and their minds to other more life-producing entrepreneurial activities. Not just do a company, but do a company that helps better life in a way. Because we know as a deep, long time evolving system that the best investment we can make is investing in life, investing in biodiversity, investing in soil, investing in our ecosystem capacities. And the intricate part of that, which I love this story of place framework developed by Regenesis, is how can we frame a new story, a new relationship of you to your place? And through that process, help open a new window into your relationship to your own little watershed. But, and again, this is where maybe where I get too tied into the context or the spaghetti of all of this. And it's because we need to also realize how our little place connects to our larger place, to our larger whole. And this is obviously where some kind of ecological literacy can play into it and helping us understand nested systems. And how Mexico, for example, like us going into this, we go through it in every project we develop, but at some point we said in working all of our projects through Mexico is the story of Mexico is so beautiful and crazy, and it's helped shape the planet through multiple different moments. See, Mexico in our geological movements and Mexico and Central America, where it broke off, it changed the flow of the oceans, and it's what ultimately brought about the ice ages. And also in the Yucatan Peninsula is where the asteroid fell, right? And then the dinosaurs. Then we get the Columbian exchange through the conquest of Tenochtitlan. And as Charles C. Mann frames it, it's where globalization started and where the distribution of goods through the planet started to flow. And you can imagine Italian food without tomatoes that came, I believe, from Peru, but their flow was through this Columbian exchange, as Charles C. Mann puts it. And this just helps me to deepen my understanding of how my territory has evolved, right? And I believe that's where new possibilities can emerge. And I always go to this geological, or as an architect, I would say a topographical aspect of the territory in and of itself. Like this is a section of Mexico from Puerto Vallarta to Veracruz, which is a highly unique, and again, all territories have their own little story and uniqueness. So understanding where we are, I think, is part of what the solution can bring to a regenerative understanding of it. Like how our river flows, or the size of the Mississippi watershed. How what we exchange goes through the same biological flows. We are biology. And our exchanges and the way we've designed our ways have highly diminished our forests and the biodiversity of, again, going back to what Mexico in all of this is one of the 5 top mega diverse countries, right? And home to a number of biodiversity metals, you could say, of cacti, pines, oaks, and reptiles. In Mexico, it's where we have the first, as Mann again, I believe puts it, is the first genetic experiment in history. We are of corn. Somos hombres de maíz, somos de maíz, or something is like is the Mayan saying. And let me have a little water. The beautiful understanding of how the cross-pollination of different teocintle specimens helped bring about corn, one of the staple foods of the world now. And again, it's about a system, and it's not corn in and of itself. It's the corn part of the milpa. And the milpa, sometimes people refer to it as the three sisters: corn, beans, and zucchini. And it's not just these three, calabaza. It's much more related to a longer 20 to 25, I believe, year cycle of how you go with the moons. And ultimately, the milpas will also grow fruits, carbon, and obviously trees and wood. You see, Mexico had a very high occupation prior to, and I believe the entire Americas, but had a very high occupation prior to the conquest. This amount of civilization of people, 26 million people, did not come back to this state until 1960. So how can we understand population from 1491 as 26 million? And this is, again, not Mexico City. This is just the entire central area of Mexico. And without Walmarts, without tilapia, that fish that we import from China. There was a very intimate rhythm, or a very intimate relationship that formed between the people and its territory. And again, a good way for me to understand it, or a beautiful aha moment, was looking at this beautiful documentary on oaks and how our relationship to oaks is intimately tied to not only boat building and doors and Cambridge and Oxford, but also to ink and a wasp that pollinates a little avellana, bellota, acorn. The larva mutates, right? And the acorn forms these beautiful, weird shapes that they grind, and that without this, Leonardo da Vinci would have not have, or maybe we would have found another way.
I do think that as long as you continue looking at things through that old patriarchal Cartesian Newtonian lens, you're going to miss out on what the world really is. You, we, all of us, we need a new vision of the world, and we need a more comprehensive, more inclusive science to support us. There is a new theory emerging now, which places all the ecological concepts we've been talking about into one coherent scientific framework. We call it systems theory. The theory of living systems.
Living systems?
Mm-hmm. All living organisms, as well as social systems and ecosystems. See, this theory would help us get a much firmer grasp on the sciences that deal with life.
Are these all your own ideas, or do other people share them? I mean, has this been applied in the sciences anywhere?
Am I a crank? It's okay, Senator. This is real science. And many scientists, including some Nobel laureates, have been working on these ideas. Prigozhin, Bateson, Maturana, just to mention a few. Yes, it is science, but of a new kind. Instead of concentrating on basic building blocks, the systems view concentrates on principles of organization. Instead of cutting things to pieces, it looks at the living system as a whole.
How can you think usefully about things in this holistic way? That's what I don't see. You can contemplate them, you can look at them, as Thomas says. But if you want to do something, if you want to get into specifics, by definition, don't you have to take things apart? How can you talk usefully about a tree without talking about its roots or its leaves or its bark?
Well, I could, without even naming the parts you mentioned. A Cartesian would look at a tree and conceptually take it to pieces. But then he would never really understand the nature of the tree. A systems thinker would look at a tree and see the seasonal exchange between tree and earth, earth and sky. Would see the annual cycle, which really is one big breath the earth takes through its forests, providing us with oxygen, the breath of life, linking the earth with the sky and us with the universe. A systems thinker would look at the tree and see the life of the tree only in relation to the life of the whole forest. Would see the tree as a habitat for birds, a home for insects. But if you look at a tree and try to understand it as something separate, you will be bewildered by the millions of fruits it's producing in its lifetime, because only 1 or 2 trees will grow from those fruits. So if you look at the tree and see it as a member of a larger living system, that abundance of fruits will make sense. Because hundreds upon hundreds of forest animals and birds will survive because of the interdependence. And the tree cannot survive on its own either. To draw water from the ground, it needs the fungus that grows at the tip of each root. And the fungus needs the root to survive, and the root needs the fungus. If one dies, the other dies. And there are millions of relationships like this in our world, each depending on each other for life. The systems theory recognizes this web of relationships as the essence of all living things. Only the uninformed would call such a notion naive or romantic, because this dependency we all share is a scientific fact.
A web of relationships.
Yes, but this time it is the web of life itself. The theory of living systems actually provides you with an outline of an answer to that eternal question, what is life?
I deeply recommend the whole movie. You can watch it on YouTube, written by Fritjof and directed by Brent. Conversation between a scientist, an artist, and a politician. And another beautiful thing learned from Capra and his work on Leonardo da Vinci, it's the whole research on his systemic view on things and his very early pre-discoveries, you could say, of multiple different sciences. And the way this water eddy, this water flow is shaped is a lot of what helps me remind myself of that this is constant change. The name of the film is called Mind Walk by Brenton Fritjof Capra. And, well, like this is, okay. So a lot of this comes again from the Regenesis way of how I've learned from them how to work, and it's understanding place and helping transfer that understanding of place to each time a broader field of people. And how can we bring designs in harmony with that place that help them in their own development? Again, playing around with memes, it's a little bit also of being this eternal optimist of even if we're going through a apparent catastrophe, it'll bring about regeneration in a way. I also deeply believe in technology and how that could help us integrate it in a way. But again, it needs to be place-based. And there are beautiful examples, again, that through the RCN, actually, and our meeting in Michoacan, I reconnected with this beautiful beer. And of these veintes, or these aha moments that bring about that, also supporting and realizing that you have these glyphosate-infused beers, but you have these other micro-regenerative industries that are emerging. And we are actually working with them and integrating them into what was an NGO that was just of architects, urbanists, or activists. It's how can we get the micro-regenerative industries involved in that beautiful, beautiful way of making beer? How can we help frame our narratives even in the development of artificial intelligence? maybe the artificial intelligence, or as I like to call it, HAL, the life-loving robot, maybe even falls in love with life and helps us, as they do right now, and all these bots are emerging. And if you see this sloth bot or this another little bot that helps measure things and help us realizing through data, but also it'll be our ability to transform that data into stories that can help open hearts and minds into a deeper relationship to life. And working from examples and visiting these examples, I believe, is crucial. One of my favorite places, I believe, on earth is this little ranch that produces medicine. It transformed from a ranch that produced obviously non-organic potato to a ranch that is healed. You just see and sense the amount of biodiversity through the insects and through how they're managing their water. Rancho La Paz is one of these beautiful examples that we can and that are starting to replicate within the Valle de Bravo watershed. And my love of the urban will not go undivided, right? I mean, looking at how Sol opened up this river, which was a second-story highway, turned it into a river park that has helped not only the politician that made this river happen be president of South Korea, but also helped Seoul find a deeper relationship to their place and turn a lot of other initiatives into a green city. Or this beautiful example on Manzanares River, which connects through 6 kilometers of river park to 95 kilometers of river biking across the Manzanares upper and lower watershed. This little Paseo del Imperial, or Paseo del Rey, I believe they call it, also connects parts of Madrid that you had to go a long way in car to get around, and now you can walk and do a 5-10-minute walk across this park. So as Bill Reed always reminds, is how can we bring nature back into cities? It's not obviously go to nature and learn in nature and get inspired and reconnected, but the deeper question, I believe, would be is how can nature come back into the city? And this is a little image of Mexico Magdalena River and the upper Magdalena River. So 25 minutes from Mexico City, my house, from the center, it'll be maybe 40 minutes. And how can we bring that quality of project within the city's fabric? When this is, I don't know, 12 years ago, the government wanted to put palm trees over Viaducto, Piedad River. And this is like, wait, that's a river. Don't put palm trees over the Viaducto, which is a tubed highway. So we developed this idea of Mexico City of rivers and this Regeneración Río Piedad, river regeneration. And ultimately it got a lot of attention in media, and it's what the link you received through the email of what right now is the Ecoducto. And again, is bringing these ideas of wetland, or like these springs that are born in the Magdalena River, into an experience in everyday city life. Mapping is a big part of it. These are all the rivers of Mexico City's watershed. And what you see in pale blue is what used to be the big 5 lake, more not lake, a proper term for it would be estuary or wetland system that connected 5 different lakes into a big, huge, beautiful, mucky little wetland, huge, highly abundant, biodiverse system, endemic to the axolotl and to spirulina. So what we've done is reduce it to these little Texcoco Lake, which you see it looks like a football field, and Zumpango and Xochimilco in the south. So small remnants of it remain, where you see the city is basically around that circle, which is Circuito Interior, our highway that goes around the edges of the city. But as Jorge Legorreta, one of my teachers in this, God rest peace be with wherever he is, the rivers in Mexico City, meter by meter, are mostly not tubed. Rivers are born healthy, actually. And a way to explain this graphically has helped frame and made us understand different relationships we have with this. I love this example that we go throughout in Tidy Street. Just the fact that it was measured and exhibited reduced this street's energy consumption by 15%. So what can we accomplish through examples of that within our city? This is Mexico City's watershed that ended up with the little vases we recollected with Greenpeace. This is the Popo and the Ista, the volcanoes we see on the right hand, and this is a 7-by-7-meter sculpture that aims to, again, through visualization, more 3D data, also helping people have an experience of their own watershed. And ultimately breaking down subjects that maybe academically we study and we love, and there are multiple tools that we go about. But I think, again, it's a question of how can we make that more colloquial, more normal in our daily language. It's just a question of how we are integrating ourselves with our living system. And frameworks are, I believe, another of those beautiful tools that help realize where we are with our thinking and where we could evolve if we could be thinking a little bit deeper. There's a series of things that I put here just to remind myself that I'm sometimes not also an academic, but a designer, and a way to work through these sci-fi scenarios into helping people realize that another future is possible. And that's a lot of what we do, just like these images that help frame something of a possibility. And this is a story of someone that came from the arms industry and wanted to do peace centers where people in Israel and Palestine came together and learned about art and ecology. And I said, well, when that happens, maybe I think that's like the future. So if anybody goes into one of these buildings, they should feel like they're entering this future sci-fi of a kidnapped Inca but I'm going all over the place, sorry. But I love this idea of exploring ancient technologies of like a pyramid emerging from the earth, but also adopting something that maybe comes from the sci-fi world. And I worked with a dear friend in sci-fi in this project, so that's a little bit what I get excited. But again, it's just looking at the potential in what we have. It's, can we make people from Palestinian and in Israel come together in a space to learn about music? Well, hopefully, but that is not within our existence. But that is something we're trying to bring into existence. This is how Regenesis again frames potential, something that could be, that comes about from another world. Another such example where we are keen to see the opportunity in things is this started out as an anonymous group, Mexican-American designers and engineers responding to the Trump wall that is maybe, well, hopefully stopped soon, but currently under construction. We are not about to build a wall. We need to talk about hyperconnection, not about disconnection and segregation. So our proposal was not to build a wall. Let's regenerate our shed watersheds. Let's put some solar panels, which would maybe even like give enough electricity in those areas to enough or big parts of Mexico and the US. Let's have it be a shared nation, otra nation, playing with the Spanglish and helping again frame a conversation of possibility and potential through a group of people that are bridging cultures and not dividing it. And yes, let's put a hyperloop. Why not? Let's make it maybe worthwhile investing and have it be transporting goods across the country and people and having us hyperconnect and regenerate our shared watersheds. And the watershed again as the minimum biome of how we can participate within our own system. Coming back to Tomas's work and the impact that has had in Mexico City. And coming through a little bit of the framework of story of place and how through the geological formations of a place and how geology dictates hydrology and how geology and hydrology dictate biology, how these ultimately flow into how humans settle and how and where they settle. What culture develops from that dictates the economy, the education, our psychology, and our cosmology of how we see ourselves in the world. And you can see our trans-Mexican neovolcanic axis and our watershed from space. There's a couple of little white dots that we go into, and it's the volcanoes where we are embedded within this little special little region that is so close to the equator, but so high up that is highly and uniquely biodiverse. How it's working also, people call it a lake, and it's not a lake. It's more, as I said, this wetland system which infiltrates water through its mountain ranges, and water then comes up through the center part, more like a sponge. And just imagine looking at this city in 1500. No? And again, the expression of how we have lost the water is this little 3D version of a little piece we did that's going around on an exhibit, and trying to understand the amount of water we lost. Every layer is 10 years, and we're coming back from the 1500s back come to the present day. And just watching people interact with these pieces and being used as examples in pedagogical examples, I think it's part of what really brings me to do things, because I believe it's learning about it, right, and forming a relationship to it, but it's also about doing. It's this what Schumacher frames in Schumacher College, the heads, hearts, and hands. And even if it's just a 2D infographic of explaining how we bring water from adjacent watersheds, what's the cost, each drop in this diagram helps us also understand the quantity of the total amount of rain. Because if we want people to be participative in a protopian future, or a future that is not dystopic, right? Part of this understanding and invitation to participate is our next bridge. I believe we have the tools, the prototypes, the case studies, and it's a question of framing conversations to really bring about this cultural shift. And the renderings, right? This is the Piedad River I was mentioning, and its regeneration compared to a biosphere reserve, and saying great cities are where kids can run through their rivers in a safe way, as this kid on the left is doing in the biosphere reserve in Oaxaca. How can we accomplish that quality within our megalopolis? The Piedad River project ultimately coalesced into an NGO. The NGO is called 4 to the power of 3, no? 4 by 4 by 4, cuatro al cubo. And we envision it as this like pyramid where each different aspect or organization or person participating in it brings about a stone. And we build together this pyramid. And it's 4 por 4 por 4 because it's 4 axes: water, mobility, public space, and responsible consumption at 4 different levels: individually, collectively, locally, and regionally, and 4 different change of actions: budgets, infrastructures, and law. Budgets, habits, budgets, infrastructures, and law, speaking to this systemic change that we can realize. Because again, it's going to the mapping of our green spaces within Mexico City, but it's also how we're consuming. And it's about green infrastructure and the amount of green infrastructure that we can put within the city, but it's also a type of infrastructure that can help generate better culture. It's not just about installing a wetland or a rain harvesting water system, but or a rain garden, but it's a question of how can people be engaged in the participation of it and ultimately appreciate it and form some type of attachment or good attachment to it. This slide comes back to the Simon Sinek talk in the TEDx, which I think is really good. And it says, you have to start with the why. And that's a lot of another example of how we try to translate messages into helping find the general ground of why we are doing what we are doing. And the benefits of what a living river can generate in terms of clean water. Sorry, because of the sound, they're mulling some tree here on the sidewalk. And ultimately realizing that socializing, or this is what we say here, socializando, or expanding the message of what living rivers could entail, we created the Picnic en el Río. And the NGOs that participated in, right now in Cuatro al Cubo, we created Picnic en el Río 2012 around, I believe. And this comes just from the simple idea of saying, what would we do if the river was alive and flowing through this viaducto in the middle of these cars? Because this is the first river that was tubed in Latin America. So we went around for like, well, let's go all naked canoeing in the river, or let's do a yoga class that we also did. But it's just coming again to some type of simple essence of, just a sec, sorry. Activity in the house, sorry. And using these socializations also, we always took boards and printouts and did some seed recollection or even seed planting.
Listo. Ahorita vamos a tener agua, ya trajeron agua. Entonces, ahorita vamos a tener que acarrear agua.
Me hubiera traído mi pistola de agua.
Mira.
¿Sí?
Listo. Entonces, haciendo que sí.
¡Bravo!
Era por ahí. Ya.
This is a place where two rivers join in and form Piedad River. And where right now the Ecoducto sits. And the Ecoducto was not our idea. The Ecoducto was our reconciling force to a way of government saying, oh, that place where you do the picnics, we're gonna put a park. And we're like, yeah, okay, but what about the river? It says, oh, it's gonna have blue lights so that we can pay homage to the river. And it's like, well, hold on those blue lights, and why don't we do a real wetland? So this wetland gets water from the underflowing river drainage systems and treats it through this living system. What we are seeing in this wetland and how the water gets treated, as we know, well, wetlands are one of the best ways, or if not the best way, to treat sewer, heavy metals and hormones and a series of things. So our also response to that reconciling idea was, and let's have it be a laboratory. Let's measure the quality of the water and the biodiversity, and let's measure, hopefully at some point, the air quality around that space and how much carbon it's fixating. And let's treat it also as a museum with over 40 different infographics that help explain the way that we got here and where we would like to go, and certain different systems and their microorganisms, which actually are the protagonists of the story. Because this is a beautiful insight that came to me during this process, is that microorganisms are the reason we are putting the gravel in the way they're putting the gravel in, and the soils and the type of soils and the type of plants are there, so a type of microorganism can emerge there, and those are the real actors and protagonists of the story. And this all started with a workshop. This all started with, how can we bring about story of place in not a contractual way with a client or with government, but how can we develop story of place in a way that integrates with academia and governmental people, and between the first and second-year workshop, the Piedad River emerged. And then the Picnic en el Rio movement. So this is just a little example of something that I would consider tactical urbanism, of something that is tactical in a way of how we are going to relate to our watershed. And always coming back to the topographical map for us is understanding our region in this little sculpture that is the selfie spot designated by our curator-in-chief, Luis Ramajo. And this is the way of how we can explain it. This is a way of how people can also maybe have a more body or corporeal experience of it. And by coincidence, it just happened to frame the flow of cars, which is one of the infrastructures that have helped eliminate the lake. That's just a little diagram of how Cuatro al Cubo and the other examples of tactical urbanism that we always invite people, and it's a big emerging thing right now over the world, of just inviting people to paint the proper geometry of how the pedestrians and the cars and the bikes can coincide within this space. It's ultimately bringing about strategies that can inspire, that are quick, beautiful, inexpensive, and systemic. This is another deeper conversation, which I deeply recommend. I don't know if Bill already maybe gave a talk or he's pending, but his book, because it's a big web of complex things. So going into learning about how to integrate complex themes and the integrative design process is one of the aspects of how big complex projects can come about. And pushing, I have like a little time to go. I would like to explain also what we've delivered for the last the administration currently in Mexico City government. And it's another effort to try to explain watershed and how can a watershed regeneration strategy come about in Mexico City. So we have a series of projects that have happened. Number one, Quebradora, is still hopefully being fixed because it's not functioning correctly. It's flooding parts of Iztapalapa. Sadly, it's a Holcim Prize winner, but between project and construction, or construction and project, and not paying attention to the hydrologist, that's a project that we need to fix, because the green infrastructure projects that are happening should be not forgotten, should be paid attention to and developed in terms of monitoring and in terms of using them as case studies so that we can or they can funnel more funds to it. It's a question of developing more emblematic projects at key acupuncture sites across the watershed that, along with the Cuatro al Cubo allies, we helped to map and to propose. In parallel, and sadly, this is the part that's not happening, it's developing a long-term watershed plan and a new governance of water, which that is also happening through Elena Burns and Pedro Moctezuma through the new water law. But it's these long-term watershed visions and learning to change the governance. But again, my little niche of things is in helping identify emblematic projects and help them expand. If you would have told me years ago that Mexico City now has as its policy, almost broadly, of putting rain gardens in sidewalks. Mexico City now has over 150 little rain gardens across the watershed, which I think is beautiful. And identifying other potential sites of this delta is another project we've developed for a time, maybe picking up, but it's the delta of these rivers, Rio Piedad and Rio Churubusco, and doing a water park. And it's also a space that a lot of events occur and a lot of festivals and music festivals occur. Putting attention to the western ravines, which are, again, sewers and badly treated, and trash ends up filling there, where they could be prone examples of going where most of the water is infiltrated within our aquifer, which is our western slopes. Turning this initiative of Calle Completa, or the complete street, but framing it maybe as the super complete street where it's not only about mobility, but it's about integrating green infrastructure within the web that this forms. And this needs to be watershed coherent. If you're in the upper watershed, maybe it's more towards the rain garden. And if you're in the lower watershed, maybe it's more towards the wetland. But paying attention to our minimal holon or organism is ultimately required, like working in the Magdalena Eslava watershed, or what I believe would be the crucial and most important watershed, which is our Xochimilco wetland watershed. Ultimately, it's creating these little medium, extra small, sorry for the Rem Koolhaas reference, but extra small, medium large, and extra large projects that can connect as a constellation of projects that are coherent within the watershed, but can help shift culture. Culture through prototypes, culture through data, culture through graphics, culture through explaining, and helping us develop a shared understanding of this bioregion. And why a lot of projects end up falling short is that I believe they don't speak to the highest trajectory or potential that they could develop. Ultimately, the project can go in and of itself. You need a field of people and organizations that are supporting that project and accompanying the development of that project. And in order to knit people within this understanding, it is a series of experiences, from workshops to walks to plant seeding and working on the land. And it's also about doing fun things, like just drawing a piece of graffiti that you can use for a while and put an example of where a bike lane could be on a very underused side street of Viaducto. Ultimately, I believe it's about illuminating a subject, shedding a light on it, and creating something that helps that understanding. And if we're not experiencing that this first on, like me swimming in this river is transformational. It's looking for this little river that you can see yourself as a part of. So I normally always start talk, I forgot at the beginning of this one, but saying, who is your favorite river? This guy is called Santiago and he flows in the upper martins of Oaxaca. And how can we bring that again into the urban matrix of the city, as the doctor hydrobiologist that designed this wetland is admiring? As the report link that Fernanda was kind enough to send to you is a space that now hosts 99 registered plants instead of what it had before, which is 4. And a place that has fixated 80 tons of carbon a year. It's a question of transformational culture in a way. And what's helped me to understand it a lot is this little festival called Burning Man, which is actually not going on this week. And how that community not only took the design of the Axolotl art card that we did for them, but turned it into a learning experience. And you go into the car and this car hosts activities for the kids within Burning Man. And it explains, Ben, Professor Axo, explains, or well, we have more people in camp that take up the role, but explains the qualities, the essence of this little organism and why we, and a lot of people over the world have fallen in love with it. And why also it's like this cosmic joke or coincidence that one of the most regenerative organisms we know lives and is endemic to this, one of the most destructive cities, maybe, degenerative cities. So I just see it as a beautiful example of what John Quigley shows us, that art can change the world, literally. This image was shared so much between the ranchers of Nebraska, and it got to Neil Young, and it got to Willie Nelson, and then a concert happened, and all over the media, and then the White House got a hold of it, and Keystone Pipeline was shut down. It's not because of this image, but it's what this image can help emerge and help bring about. We play a lot around with the organisms within our watershed, like this axolotl doing doing a little yoga, which is not anatomically correct, but again, helps us maybe do a little kiosk that can help spread the regenerative thing. And again, just to be clear on why the axolotl, and it's because his home right now is a little bit more like this. Parts of Xochimilco since the last earthquake have not recovered. And it has, as an interview I heard of Vandana Nashiva, it's the literal foundation of Mexico City. If we lose Xochimilco, we lose Mexico City. And it's, I don't know if the right word is an oxymoron or it's paradoxical, but going into these art places and exploration places, it, in my case at least, helped refuel my creativity and will to do these things in a space that is highly mined with frustration and promises of this river, this project is going to change everything, and then not happening. So I believe it's a question of jumping at any opportunity we have to just paint a different scenario. Like we got invited to paint rivers in a mapping was done in the Mexico City Zócalo. And again, how can we host these experiences a little bit more? Recollecting water from your watershed, inviting this little guy.
Primo, ¿cómo estás, primo José? Ricardito, Samuel, Leticia, ¿cómo son amigos de Cattan?
And again, this is part of the sculpture with Greenpeace that I showed you. And this character, Arturo, is super cívico. I invite you on YouTube to research them and watch all of their videos. They're trying to civilize people through comedy. And taking advantage of those relationships we've developed over the years, I think it's beautiful. I mean, let aside that you get millions of views if you participate with these, but also it's the opportunity to reach people that are not within our normal talking spheres and people that are not convinced of it. And seeing that our water is born healthy, but then gets contaminated as it's going through the city, also maybe communicates to another type of people. I put these images as just a simple, again, reminder to myself that I love architecture. I am a recovering architect, but I love architecture. And again, a simple framework that we can go about to see that our architecture is well-based is seeing that the energy is produced cleanly, that you use exactly the amount that you need and not be overly consumptions of energy, what your site can give you. This building sits in the land where it's letting 60-year-old jacarandas and an 80, almost 90-year-old avocado tree live there, where a normal developer would have bulldozed it. Our client was the owner of the land, so she wanted to maintain it. And just this opportunity to help put a little piece of architecture within the city that generates habitat, harvests its own water and treats its own sewage water, so it's reused within the garden and in their own urban grow garden. And the materials we're using need to be local, clean, renewable at the most extent that we can. And a little bit to speak to our habits, right? And the idea of just buying from a local agroecologically produced food is one of the most transcendental impacts we can make. Our podcast, which you were asking me, they're still in iTunes and Spotify, I believe. If not, reach out to me and I'll send a link to it. And it's called Aguas because how we've framed water here is as an emergency. It's, as I try to explain it sometimes, it's like if you're driving around with somebody in the US and you're about to crash and you yell, water, water, right? The guy you're driving with just says like, what are you talking about? The way we've framed water, which comes from when people used to throw the water out of their balcony, and that was their latrine. So they yelled, water. Our old question is, why didn't they yell, be careful, no? Cuidado, or shit? But how and the meaning we attribute to the word water needs to be, I believe, deeply regenerated. And in doing this, it's forming this community of people that are continuously engaging with each other through one thing, or maybe it's just enjoying agroecological beer, or doing a walk, or like what Gabi does, the urban grower, does these food experiences, come de tu cuenca, eat from your watershed. So a lot of what we've been trying to do is rebrand the word cuenca, the word water, trying to put a new meaning into what these words can bring about. And I love this meme deeply. This is a little bit of where we're shifting to. And it's trying to bring the developmental, developmental, not in terms of the personal development, which is zone zero and arguably the most important thing, but bringing the type of projects that we've done and the energy we've involved within the city to places that are adjacent to the city, more agroecological farms and things outside the city. It's doing these examples, I believe, that will bring about the desirable futures. It's taking opportunity to continue to learn. Schumacher College has been my deep, favorite place on earth. But with mere $200, I believe you can take the Capra course online. And I think it's one of the best investments we can make in taking advantage of this amazing teacher that we can learn so much from. Obviously, I share the course here and the practitioner's course that the people from Regenesis are engaged in the worldwide. It's something that we've tried to replicate here in the city and within our buildings. Like if we're integrating straw bales within our building, we're inviting people in the community to come and participate in this alternative development method. This I also sent in an email, and it's just a little bibliography that I did in my way, which is highly saturated and chaotic and hopefully a little bit confusing, so that you can also choose a little bit of what niche and what subject draws your attention, or how I used to pick album covers, which is through the art in the cover. But we are at the core of things, developing human capital, human potential. As a team engaging within the development of a project, as a team engaging with the community in the development of an understanding. So how can we have that human development in this way of creating protopias? And going back to images, again, it's like these are two possible futures. Which one would you like to participate in? And a lovely project that it's just a creative thing we're engaged in, is how did we get to a regenerative future in the year 2100? So this is a dear friend from the future, and we developed this through a lab, and we call it FAC because we want it to be a little punk, but because it's an acronym to futures, arts, cities, and knowledge. We don't want you to be apathic about it and just say, oh, fuck it. But we want you to do something and do something about it. Facking, do it, as we say. This is a little video, and I'll end with this.
How did we do it? Oh, it was amazing. It started off with these student meetings and revolutions, and the guerrilla art transformed the city into that pivotal point where everybody was behind the science instead of the politics, and it resulted in a total transformation of the city into these micro-connected oases.
It's about these new world emerging and playing with the narratives, the images, and things that can help us inspire and transform. A little bit of what we've been working on this past year is a museum project that, if you're interested in, I can go into unraveling the document we present. Maybe it's helpful or pedagogical. I don't always say that word wrongly. And it's about doing and creating this sacred space within Magdalena River. It's a water museum, but it's a park that you would hopefully want to go visit, not only because of the beauty of this space, which was one of my first drone shots that I love. I'm into drones right now. A beautiful opportunity to see territory from a different way. And how can we also engage in this through built environments, through the architecture that aligns with our equinox, or solstice, our water flows, and help us reconnect to nature. Thank you very much for listening. I'm here for any questions. I know we still have half an hour, and if at any point we have time, you find it useful, I would love to go through like our story of place, document and process through Magdalena River, or the capitals, or how we bring about this chaos in my mind into something that can be more tangible and practical. Thank you so much for listening.
Yes, this was a great transition into beginning of our 5th unit, Culture and Society. And I think it was an amazing story that you walked us through. A short correction is we had an hour and a half, so actually the session is over, so we don't have another half an hour.
I thought it was from 2 to 4. Sorry.
Yeah, but no
A little
problem.
bit faster.
We can still hang on. People are used to hanging on afterwards. Beautiful. I open the floor to anybody who wants to make a comment or question.
Everything is clear then. No questions.
Hello, more than questions, I just want to say congratulations to your work. Elias, it's impressive what you are doing. It's very inspiring. We have another crazy guy here in Costa Rica working with art. His name is, what's his name? Alexis Gaillard. He's from Belgium, and he's creating land art, which is also another thing.
I love land art.
Really crazy, wonderful. He's painting landscape with trees. So what you are doing in Mexico is beautiful, and I think we need all this energy and creativity to co-create a new future and show little by little with some pilots that it's possible, that everybody can get involved. So congratulations for this wonderful presentation. Huh?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I have a question. Well, first, I want to second what Esteban said. This was an amazing presentation. Thank you. Very inspiring. I was wondering if maybe you could speak a little bit about the intersections.
Can you speak up a little bit, Alessandra?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I was wondering if maybe you could speak a little bit about like the intersections of recovering landscape with also addressing more social issues, let's say, because like Mexico and like all of Latin America has like a deep problem of inequality and violence, and I'm just wondering, how does this connect to that aspect as well, that it's not just ecological but also social.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And a lot of what how government works a little bit is, from my experiences, and in the Ecoducto project, to take one very tangible example, it's like, we have 100 million pesos, so we're going to do a park there. Right? And it's like, wait, can it be a wetland? Can it be a learning center? Can it be this lab that we envision? It was like, yeah, okay. We managed to get a little wedge in the door. The part that is in one way brilliant, because the guy in the last, this was also like in the transition from one administration to the other. So if the last administration did it, I really don't care for it. I'm a new administration. So we're dealing with that a little bit. The way that project has been maintained is because I always say there's good people everywhere, even within the Mexican government. And I'm thinking about this guy. You need to really learn how to speak, not to the mayor, but to the mid-level hero. I'm going to help you, right? And this guy, Ricardo Jaral, amazing guy, left some people syndicated. Yep. So the new administration had no other choice than to continue their contract, something like that. So that space is maintained. But being said that, there's a big opportunity miss where, and I don't know how to address this, but I believe there needs to be some type of NGO or public-private partnerships within these places that can carry those cultural projects. Because, and I have a signed contract from the last administration that's not being met. But again, the contract with government says I can break my contract at any time. So how can you generate the social pressure so that the cultural program can be addressed? And we didn't manage to do a lot, but one of the beautiful little things that we did with adjacent to the Ecoducto are like something around like 300 schools. So with a couple of them, we did a competition of the kids going to Ecoducto, and after a visit with a biologist and all of that, they had to do a little video. And I have all these videos. Sorry, my mind just presents it. I do a little like just collage of sounds and videos because it just transmits a little bit of the kids' videos. So I think it's where we need to go. Engage with the kids.
Estamos en el ecoducto Río de la Piedad, que está ubicado en Insurgente Sur 557. Es un parque con un andador pequeño. Son 1.6 kilómetros de camino para poder andar con tu perro, etcétera. Y puedes estar bien seguro porque hay la cola.
So yeah, just a little taste. But you see the energy that comes out from that little thing. So I think that's one of the biggest opportunities. And again, just a little bit of an example, but people in the use of it appreciate it, but you also need the graphics there to explain it, and you also need the NGO to make government accountable, right? I don't know if I'm answering but at the essence of it, I think we need a new way of how we spend public money. And the core of it is, oh, you're going to do the construction, so I hire you for the construction, bring me another 3 budgets that are more expensive, so I need to hire you, you get budgets from your friends, and then government hires you to do the construction, the project. The social pressure we have done gave them an excuse to spend 100 million pesos. But the social pressure we have made government make the construction person accountable and say, hey, but spend on the wetland. Hey, but do the sculpture. Hey, but spend on the graphics. So you need, I believe, that social pressure to be well articulated, to be continuous, to be ideally well funded through our $300 billion fundraising campaign worldwide. I don't know, but we do need a very heavy balance towards the private industry and towards them and government doing whatever they want. And at another level, I think we need to engage with those construction companies in a bigger way that I am not equipped to do. But the contracts and the reason we're not doing a lot of work for the government right now is because we don't have the big capital as a company to be able to fund the construction up to 40% of it, and then government starts to pay you whenever they want. So you need the big capital. And if we don't have the economic capital, I think we need to create that cultural and social capital to pressure both government and the construction companies.
Anybody else?
Alicia wrote a question, and she said, I am wondering if you can speak a little about the funding of all these projects, but I guess maybe you...
A little bit. Yeah, Ecoducto was funded by the last administration. Siéntate, papi, siéntate. Sorry, the dog is... But like art projects, the sculpture was funded by Greenpeace. The picnics in the river were funded by the social civil society. Like, I'll buy my friend Fermin, right? I'll buy the big, because we need a big picnic. How do you say, mantle? So we had 100-meter long picnic mantel. Tablecloth. Fermin also is a constructor, so he said, I'll do the stairs so that people can walk down to the picnic easier. So those are collectively funded. I did the flyers and printed the boards. Specifically, I don't know of some project in particular you want details on the funding. The Burning Man project was funded by the camp and by a crowdfunding campaign, which we raised like $70,000 of saying, hey, we want to build this. Can you help us? And we raised it. Basically, so I think it's multiple things. A lot of it, like the graphic work that we do that is not related to a project, the funding I do myself out of the glyphosate images. It's like, I'm in shock. I need to do something about it. So let's do those infographics so that we can help illustrate this a little bit easier for people. So it's all also at, work as a freelance architect is a lot about like the movie industry or things like that, where you have a lot of work and then you finish and you don't have work and you're like, well, what do I do? Fire everybody? I can't. So we just think of something new that emerges. And a lot of that, I want to speak to this a little bit too. It's through prácticas profesionales, internships. So the noise we've been able to make also has made us a nice little hub for people that want to do their professional internships with. So like the Viaducto Rio Piedad was born when an intern from France came into the office because she wanted to do her professional practice with us. And it's like, yeah, but well, what do we do? It's like, okay, let's do this. And with Lucy, right? And she's just brilliant. And that's what came about. So a lot of it is matching people that want to come into the office to learn something and us having the downflow in the amount of work to be able to concentrate to a subject that is dear to us, that we want to help. Like the mapping of Mexico City rivers was one person doing her internship for like 3 months. Getting the INEGI maps and drawing it line by line by line by line. So sometimes a lot of that work is a lot of, as my architecture professor would say, horas nalgas. How do you say that? Hours on your tush. Yeah.
Well, Elias, thank you. You reminded me of the president who got rid of our army. He always said, tie your cart to the highest star so you don't lose your way with the ups and downs of life.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what you told us how
but
to do.
You said it so much better than me. Yeah. Tim would say, follow a high order or a trajectory with its highest order of possibility or something like that. Like, yeah. And it's about trajectories, right? Because a lot of the work we do is overwhelmed with frustration. A project in Puebla or the project in Chiapas or the project and the government and the money, and then the money went with Emmanuel, literally. So you get into these ideas that are very inspiring for you and the work you're doing, and then they just get cut off because of funding or whatever. So we need that trajectory over what could be a very sinuous path, or will be a very sinuous path. And we need to have a little bit of fun doing it with little incremental tactical examples. If not, there is no will that gets regenerated for you to be able to show up the next day and say, that didn't work. Okay, so what are we gonna do now? A very small art exhibit project or think can just get your mind rolling in a new way. And I think that could be enough to pass a frustrating time.
Thank you so much, Elias.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All of us appreciated it.
And please write more questions, things. I'll send over a PDF with the slides as well. And whatever you need, I'm here.
Thank you. Un abrazote.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elias.
Thank you. Abrazote.
Gracias.
Ciao.
Thank you.